Anytime I talk about my favorite Swede players, the question comes up, well, where's Kent Nilsson? Uh, my favorite Calgary Flames that I did, where's Kent Nilsson? You had to watch Nilsson, right? Why isn't Nilsson on the list? Kent Nilsson has to be on here. Nilsson was the most purely talented player that Wayne Gretzky ever saw play. Yep. What we ignore is all the criticism. Yep. And there was a ton of it. So what I'll do, I'll go through his career stats first, and then we'll go through what that criticism was and where it puts him in the hierarchy of NHL greats and everything. Because when he came into the World Hockey Association in 1977 for the 77-78 season, he came into a team that's ready for a championship and won a championship. 80 games, 42 goals, 65 assists, 107 points. In the playoffs, 9 games played, 2 goals, 8 assists, 10 points for the champions. And then for Avco Cup champions again in 78-79, 78 games played, 39 goals, 68 assists, 107 points. In the playoffs that year, 10 games played, 3 goals, 11 assists, 14 points. So back-to-back championships, everything looks great for Winnipeg. Now we're going to the NHL, and the NHL goes, wait a minute, that Kent Nilsson guy that you have, he was drafted 64th overall by the Atlanta Flames in 1976. So they're putting in a reclamation on him. He's been reclaimed by the Atlanta Flames. Sorry about that. Sorry, and there were a lot of other reclaimings that were going on. And it really hit the Winnipeg Jets hard. So Nilsson ends up landing in Atlanta. It is the last year for the Atlanta Flames in Atlanta. So you'll see an ATL next to the Calgary Flames logo for that reason. And in 79-80 with the Flames, 80 games, 40 goals, 53 assists, 93 points, which shows that at that point, the WHA and the NHL, they're about even when it comes to the overall depth of talent and all that, because look, it's not like Nilsson put up a lot less points in the NHL than he did in the WHA, which is one of the reasons why I think WHA totals should still be recognized, just in general, by hockey fans. And yet, we focus on the NHL stats more than anything else. 4 games played in the playoffs for Atlanta. He goes -4, and so they end up moving to the Calgary location from Atlanta. Atlanta feeding Canada hockey teams since 1980. So the first year in Calgary, 80 games played, 49 goals, 82 assists, 131 points, which was third overall in the NHL. That is a record that stands to this day for the Calgary Flames of points in a season, 131. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say Johnny Gaudreau never reaches 130 points in a season. That's a record that should stand for all time. And that's where things get kind of murky here. Could he score? Yes. Was the offense there? Absolutely. And in the playoffs in 81, they went all the way to the semifinals. And of course, I covered the Calgary-Philadelphia series. Now, he had 14 games played in the playoffs that year, 3 goals, 9 assists for 12 points and a +4. So in the playoffs, below a point a game. And this is where some of the criticism starts showing up, like, well, once the games get tougher, where's Kent? 81-82, 41 games played, misses 39 games that year, 26 goals, 29 assists, 55 points. In the playoffs, he plays 3 games, has 3 assists. Calgary went out in a sweep that year against Vancouver. He was a plus-minus of 0. 82-83, 80 games played, 46 goals, 58 assists, 104 points, which was 9th in the NHL that year. 9 games played in the playoffs, 1 goal, 11 assists, 12 points. He was a -10 in the playoffs in 1983. And keep in mind, this is where their brethren north of them are taking all the headlines with Gretzky and everything. 83-84, 67 games played, I should say. 31 goals, 49 assists, 80 points. No playoff games for him that year. 84-85, 77 games played, 37 goals, 62 assists, 99 points. Almost 100 points. Didn't quite play 80 games. Would have had that 100th point. In the playoffs, 3 games played, 1 assist, and he's a -2. Criticism is huge. The criticism of Kent Nilsson at this point is very, very loud. They've been knocked out in the first round 3 times since he got there, and at least that he played in. And so the criticism is, what does he do in the big games? And we'll come back to that. So he gets traded to Minnesota. June 15th, 1985, he is traded with a 1986 third-round pick that didn't end up being an NHLer for a 1985 second, which became Joe Nieuwendyk, and a 1987 second, which became Stefan Matteau. So both of those players were hits. Nieuwendyk, pretty big goal scorer for Calgary, and it's a trade that the Minnesota North Stars had no idea at the time was going to be so costly. 85-86, 61 games played for the Minnesota North Stars by Nilsson, so you'll see the Dallas Stars logos, but it says Min because they were still in Minnesota at that point. 16 goals, 44 assists, 60 points. In the playoffs, they're out in the first round. 5 games, 1 goal, 4 assists, 5 points, +2. But at that point, he's already playing his way out of Minnesota. 86-87, he only played 44 games for the North Stars. 13 goals, 33 assists, 46 points. He was traded March 2nd of 1987, so at the deadline, to Edmonton for money, for cash. Peter Pocklington paid money to get Nilsson, who was putting up more than a point a game for the Minnesota North Stars. In Edmonton in 86-87, 17 games played, 5 goals, 12 assists, 17 points. In the playoffs, he would win his Stanley Cup ring. 21 games played, 6 goals, 13 assists, 19 points, and he's a +11. And then he went home and played in Sweden. Played in Sweden for a good long time. 94-95, he announces, I'm going to make a comeback. January 26th of 1995, he signed with the Edmonton Oilers to try to make his comeback. He would play 6 games. He had 1 goal in those 6 games, no assists. And that's where the comeback stopped. Didn't play in the playoffs that year. In his career in the NHL, 553 games played, 264 goals, 422 assists, 686 points. That points per game is really, really high. In the WHA, 158 games, 81 goals, 133 assists, 214 points. In the NHL playoffs, 59 games played, 11 goals, 41 assists, 52 points. So you look at it and you're going to say, wow, this guy was great. And so if you're younger, you might look at these totals and say, wow, Nilsson was fantastic. And you may look at that quote from Wayne Gretzky and say, what a great player. Played in All-Star games in 1980 and 1981. His career shooting percentage is 12th on the all-time list in the NHL at a 19.2% clip. But again, when he wants to, gets in there. So, what I have in my hands here, 1986 yearbook. And we're going to take a look first at the Calgary Flames. So this was right after they traded Kent Nilsson. Remember, he had 99 points during the regular season. 99 points. And this is why I have these books. People ask, why do you have all those old books? This is why. Calgary needs game breaker to fan Flames. Coaches the hockey world over bemoan the lack of scoring balance on their teams. They complain that an over-concentration of scoring from a select few makes the team easy prey during playoffs when checking specialists are assigned strict shadowing duties. Badger Bob Johnson of the Calgary Flames had the opposite concern. His team produced 363 goals last season, second only to the Edmonton Oilers, but placed just 1 player among the top 45 league scorers. It's an amazing statistic, sighed Johnson after the Flames were eliminated from the playoffs by the Winnipeg Jets. We were the second highest scoring team in the league. You say to yourself, who scored all the goals? Against Winnipeg, we needed a game breaker. We needed a Howardchuk, a Bossy, a Tim Kerr, someone to break the game open for us. Only 2 Flames, both Swedes, scored more than 30 goals, and one of them is gone. Håkan Loob returns for his 3rd season, while Kent Nilsson has been traded to the Minnesota North Stars after 6 years with the Flames. Nilsson was supposed to be the game breaker, but he never fit the mold, unable to raise his intensity level when the Flames needed it most. So instead of finding a permanent home in Calgary, he leaves behind team record for career goals, 229, and points, 562. I think it speaks highly of the character and work ethic this team had to do as well as we did without the so-called superstar, continued Johnson. This is a thinly veiled swipe at Kent Nilsson, which will be extracted upon and destroyed in the next bit that I'm going to read you guys. So they get into how, you know, they're working on diversifying their attack and bringing in Gary Roberts and Brian Bradley and all these other names that longtime fans of the game know. So now we go to the Minnesota North Stars. And the headline is Nilsson, another piece in unsolved puzzle. This is a Minnesota North Stars team that had been to the Stanley Cup Finals in 81 and had been frustrated by their lack of success since then. There is no more enigmatic team in the NHL than the Minnesota North Stars. Newcomer Kent Nilsson should feel right at home with them. One of the most highly skilled players in the game today, he nonetheless has failed to live up to expectations. Does he sound familiar to North Star followers? He did, yeah. All too familiar, we suspect, which is which makes it highly appropriate for Lauren Henning, a man who parlayed marginal hockey skills into an 8-year NHL career, to take over as coach of the North Stars. He replaces Glenn Somnor, who was named interim coach after the dismissal of Bill Mahoney early in the season. Coach after coach after coach. Henning didn't last either. Henning's coaching career began with the Islanders, for whom he played 3 years ago as an assistant to Al Arbour. He took over the Springfield Indians last season, and the Islanders hired Brian Kilrea for the assistant's job. First choice for the Minnesota job was native son Herb Brooks, who was widely expected to join forces with old friend Lou Nanne, the North Stars GM. But contract talks repeatedly hit snags, and Brooks, the people's choice, was ruled out of the picture. A good departure point would be Nilsson, who was acquired from the Calgary Flames for 2 draft choices. Nobody with career numbers, 562 points in 425 games, like his, has taken so much abuse. Maybe there should be an asterisk beside his name. Most bad seasons with 100 points, said Nanne after the trade. Sure, he has deficiencies, but don't kid yourself, every team has deficiencies. If he worked hard every night, they wouldn't have traded him. What is it they say? Only Wayne Gretzky has more talent? So there it is. Wayne Gretzky seen as the only player in the league who had more talent than Ken Nilsson at the time. They also say Nilsson doesn't respond well to tight collar situations, particularly the playoffs when the Magic Man regularly seems to disappear. He was expendable, explained Flames coach Bob Johnson. We weren't building our team around him. We tried it. It didn't work, did it? We're going a different route, the honest effort route. The North Stars have been building around, and there's Brian Bellows in there, and Steve Payne, and Leo Broughton. And they get into the whole way that the team is built and how Kent Nilsson necessarily might fit into that. And for the Minnesota North Stars, for their record from that season before, Bellows had 62 points to lead the team in scoring. They desperately needed scoring. Nilsson was coming off of a 99-point season. Nilsson would go on to score 60 points. This is the yearbook after that one. Kent Nilsson still with the North Stars. He's not even mentioned in the team preview. He didn't even warrant a mention, even though he had 60 points in 61 games, and he had 5 points in 5 games in the playoffs. Not even mentioned. And a year later, he wins a Stanley Cup for Edmonton. So, for people who loved Nilsson, for all of his talents, that's great, and he had that talent. The frustration for coaches, for general managers, and sometimes for line mates, when he wants to be, was the problem. He didn't check. He didn't go in the corners. He didn't get into the mucking areas of hockey. And here's the other part of it. 1985-86, the first year that the Flames went without Kent Nilsson, traded their best player, scoring-wise, for 2 draft picks who wouldn't play for them right out of the gate. And they went to the Stanley Cup final in 86, where they lost to the Montreal Canadiens, and then in 89 they won the Stanley Cup. So it worked out for the Flames, even though they dumped him off for far less than anyone would think. Just imagine today, if a player with 90 points or 85 points in a season was traded for 2 draft picks with another draft pick, people would go nuts. And yet, here it was Kent Nilsson. So there you go. Kent Nilsson, who went from, star player here in Calgary, and within a couple of years after that, he was finding himself out of the league. Again, he signed in Sweden. He did, really dislike the amount of abuse he took from the media in Calgary. And I understand that, and yet at the same time, it wasn't just on the media side. And they talk about that in articles and stuff about Nilsson as well, that yes, the media was tough on Kent Nilsson, but so were the coaches. So were people within these teams. So were sometimes his own line mates. They'd say, yeah, he's so much pure skill that on any given night he could take over the game. But it's a matter of will to do it. So there you go. The career of Kent Nilsson. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Yeah, every now and then I dust off one of these books and grab it off the shelf and go, yeah. That gives me a window into what was going on at the time and how people were feeling at the time about that player. And so that when we look back 35 years later and we say, that guy was great. Yes, the talent was there, but there's a reason the Flames traded him. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're just browsing your way through. You happen upon this video. I will talk to you guys again, likely very soon.